welcome back to a new episode of F1 Fantasy in Review. So, let's jump straight into it. While at COTA we saw a sprint weekend, and for the sprint, it gave us a tantalising insight to how good the full race would be. We saw the Ferraris battle at a great level with each lap waiting for team drama, but it was respectful and a great dance between Leclerc and Sainz, with Sainz coming out on top. Of course, we must mention the most important part of the sprint weekend, and that was Max Verstappen winning, as well as Lando locking up, causing Sainz to snatch P2. This of course had a major impact on the Drivers' Championship, as Lando could not afford to lose points to Max. With the sprint podium being Verstappen, Sainz and Lando, it was a great sprint and hard-fought places. We also saw the Mercedes be rather flaccid, with George dropping from his starting position of P2 back down to P5. Mercedes gave the wind as the main reason for their struggles, and as we know, this had a disastrous impact on the main race. Another winner from the sprint was the Haas team, with both drivers securing P7 and P8. These were valuable points for them to secure this weekend as they fight RB for 6th in the Constructors, which is worth about $12 million. And on the other hand, we have some disappointing results from Perez to Piastri. Both managed to climb places from their starting position on the grid, but secured no points. This allowed Ferrari to gain even more valuable Constructors points, bringing the three-header race for the Constructors even closer. Now let's move on to qualifying for the main race. The most surprising result was Hamilton going out in Q1 and taking P19. Once again, Mercedes having troubles. The normal culprits take up the remaining spots up to P10. We then see Perez take P10, again not up to scratch where he needs to be to defend the Red Bull's Constructors' hopes. Magnussen takes P9, beating out his teammate, and Alonso, being a regular in the top 10 for this season, takes P8. A surprising spot is Gasly up into 7th, a great qualifying by him. Russell was locked in at P6, but for the starting grid, started from the pit lane due to taking penalties after his crash in Q3. That did mean that all the previously mentioned had moved up one spot from the starting grid, and this allowed Tsunoda to move up to P10. We saw Piastri finish in P5 for qualifying. Would he have improved if Russell hadn't crashed? And we saw the Ferraris lock out the second row of the grid, with Sainz securing P3 and Leclerc in P4. Again, without the yellow flags at the end, could they have been higher? And finally, we saw Max Verstappen starting in P2 right alongside his championship rival Lando Norris, who once again started at the front of the grid because of Russell's crash. And in the words of Lando Norris, sometimes it's good to be lucky. Now let's move on to the race result and see if any of the drivers made any major moves. Disappointingly, Hamilton saw a swift end to his race, spinning out early and DNFing. It was a race to forget, but it must be a confusing weekend for Lewis, as on one hand he is struggling, and on the other he is watching his future team perform at the highest level. We see Zhou, Ocon and Bottas take P19, P18 and P16 respectively. Nothing surprising there, apart from Ocon pitting late to steal away the fastest lap point. Alex Albon was down in 16th. Once again a disappointing race where he picked up damage early, on which pretty much sealed his fate to remain at the back. Stroll was doing his normal performance of only dropping places, starting 13th and dropping down to 15th. A disastrous strategy call resulted in Tsunoda dropping back down to P14. A surprising drop from Alonso going to 13th. We saw him struggle through the race, fighting the car more than the other drivers. He's probably counting down the days till the 2026 season. We saw Gasly drop down from his P6 start to P12, which isn't a surprise, but it must be disheartening for him. Hopefully brighter days are ahead. And for P11 we see Magnussen drop back through the field. Then in P10 we see the new kid on the block locking in a point for Williams. Franco Colapinto continues to impress. Do you think he'll be driving next year? And then we see the new kid take P9 for RB. Liam Lawson lands with a splash in COTA, and means he's now 20th out of 23 drivers from this season. Will he continue to climb in the coming races? Hulkenberg climbed through the field to take P8, a good day in the office for the Haas team. And unsurprisingly we see Perez climb, but not enough, losing out in the later stage of the race to George Russell. And without further ado, we move on to my driver of the day. Although the Ferraris had a great race, George Russell going from crashing to starting in the pit lanes to finishing 6th is an incredible result. It does make you think, if the Mercedes had started higher on the grid, would they have been in the fight for the podium? Then we move on to Oscar Piastri, who started 5th and finished 5th. And for me personally, he didn't do as much as he probably should have for the McLaren team. It's in key races like this where Oscar needs to show his raw talent and help Lando in the fight against Max Verstappen. We saw a clear difference in the driver's abilities. After pitting, Lando charged ahead and chased down Max Verstappen, while Oscar disappointingly couldn't deliver the same pace as his teammate. Now, that being said, he did pick up a healthy amount of points for McLaren in the Constructors' Championship, edging out their lead on Red Bull. So at the end of the day, Zach's probably going to be happy. And moving on. After one of the greatest battles we've seen throughout the season, we saw Lando take P4. He had no choice but to be complacent with P4 after receiving a penalty from the stewards for gaining an unfair advantage from leaving the track. Now, if this penalty was fair is up for debate. McLaren have appealed the decision, which I believe will be rejected by the FIA. If we just keep it on the track for a moment, we can appreciate how well those two drove in that moment. This is the sort of driving we want to see in F1, and to deal with penalty situations, I just think the tracks need to be refined as well as the rules. From a personal point of view, I believe that Lando had enough time to give the position back and go again, but hindsight's well, you know. I have seen a lot of people commenting online about how McLaren as a team should have given him this information, but when you consider the penalties given out to Oscar and George previously, you can understand why they could be thinking that they would not be penalised for him being pushed off the track in their eyes. Nonetheless, it was a great race up to that point, and it's a shame it had to be concluded by a penalty. But at the end of the day, it was such a great show. Hopefully there is more of this to come. And to no one's surprise, Max Verstappen finishes P3. I'll try and avoid repeating myself, but again, great racing up to that point, and Max was showing, although people may not like it, why he is a world champion driver. For Verstappen and Red Bull, these were key points to keep away from Lando Norris for the Drivers' Championship. We then saw Ferrari dominate the race. Sainz finished P2 comfortably after doing a lovely undercut on Max Verstappen. Leclerc coming out on top and gaining a gifted lead due to Verstappen and Lando fighting into turn 1. Leclerc was in a race of his own and extremely comfortable, bringing home the win for the Ferrari team and fans. For the Ferrari team, they went from a locked out second row to locking in a 1-2 win for crucial points in the fight for the Constructors' Championship, bringing them ever close to the fight for first. It is looking highly likely that due to the success for Ferrari in the second half of the season, we will see Red Bull finish third in the Constructors. This could be the final straw for Red Bull. With Perez coming up to his home Grand Prix, if he doesn't show a rapid sign of improvement, it'd be a time for them to shake things up. And that wraps everything up for the race. What a weekend, full of twists and turns on the track. Let's move on and see how the results impacted the F1 fantasy points. And so we see a familiar face taking P1 in our league. Jess, again, dominates the race. Of course, I should point out that she did use a chip, a very crucial one, Limitless, and she didn't select the Ferrari team or Sainz. She did have a really strong result, and I think there was only probably about a 20-point swing with it. However, by using her Limitless chip, it now brings her very close to 4th place. And who knows, does she have any more chips to bring her back for the fight for 3rd? Following that, 2nd place goes to the defending champion from 2023, Leo. He might have to watch out as the people behind might have chips to play, so he better look out. And for 3rd place, we have Joyant, myself and Mum. They brilliant teams, best teams, exquisite teams. And as already previously mentioned, the fight for 4th is on. With Jess's great back-to-back results, we only see her 4 points behind Chris. Does Lawrence have any chips left that could bring him back into the fight for this position? Also, with 5 races remaining, can Jess or Chris pull back the points for 3rd? So let's quickly look how people got there and didn't get there in this race. So starting with the drivers that earned us the most points this race weekend. Obviously, top money goes to Leclerc. Absolute brilliant win, especially starting from 4th. 55 points. If you've doubled it, 110. Bish bash bosh. Again, Jess with her Limitless, if she had done that, mega, but who would have known? I think that would have been a tough order to get. Then 2nd place goes to Sainz, because he won 2nd, that makes sense. And then we see Verstappen and Russell drawing for the same amount of points, which I think is really interesting because Verstappen is just so much more expensive. George's just overtakes must have gained him a lot of points. Really good to see. Again, probably should have had driver of the day, but that's just me. And then we see for the McLaren boys, we've got Piastri and Lando scoring 30 points each. Very respectable, but with everyone timesing Norris at, times 2, you get 60. Not really the money we want. There were loads more better options 4 times 2. If it was Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, Sainz, how many do you want out there? So if we move down for the lower points, some of the ones I just wanted to highlight was Lawson being 20. I know Leo got him. That was really, really good. Really good choice, and I assume that made him a bit of money as well. And then we look at the one where it's interesting again. Then we look at Perez, 19 points. Disappointing on the track and disappointing in the fantasy. So again, way too expensive. Should be way cheaper because he's just not scoring consistent points. And then we look at some other cheap but effective ones. Colapinto, 9 points. Really good. Big bag of money. Again, Albon, 11 points, really good. Not finishing a great race, but good points in the fantasy, so sometimes it's a bit confusing. And although he dropped places in the main race, still went up in money. Really good. Another one, Hulkenberg and Magnussen, 11 points, 9 points respectively. Again, confusing race results, but quite even points. So again, probably securing some nice money there. Some minus ones just to highlight, again, Alonso and Lewis. Lewis, not too surprising, minus 10 is actually quite damage limitation because of the sprint, and Alonso being minus 4 is just surprising because he dropped, and that was a big shock for me. Obviously, if we take a look at the cars, it's interesting enough to see that Red Bull Racing, again, super expensive car, 72 points. Not worth it. Can definitely spend that money a lot better. McLaren 80 points, quite healthy actually at the end of the day, and because it gets fastest pit stop, which inflated that, which is quite good. And then we see the Ferraris, lovely, big money, absolute. It's going to be interesting to see if that continues, but wow. Mercedes, obviously unsurprisingly 55 because of Lewis again dragging the points down, but unsurprising. And we see a mixed bag of cars losing and gaining money lower down. And that wraps everything up. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you enjoy the Mexican GP as it comes up. And then next week, the Brazilian GP. It's thick and fast, huzzah. For everyone watching, remember to like and subscribe to stay up to date.